Adora, you must let go.
And so, after an amazing 5-year run on Netflix, She-Ra and the Princesses of Power has reached its conclusion with its final season. So with the show now over and me having basically nothing else to do during quarantine, I thought I would make a video sharing my casting ideas for She-Ra if it were to get a live-action adaptation. Now, I know She-Ra has so many great characters throughout the different seasons, but to keep this video short and sweet, I'm only going to be focusing on the major characters from the show. I've based these decisions on who I think would look right for the part and who I think would be able to act well in the role. I also try to find actors that are as close as possible to the characters' ages and physical attributes in the show. But before we start anything, please remember that these are just my own ideas and take on the characters. I don't own the rights to any of the characters nor actors mentioned in this video, so please don't take this seriously. Now that we got that out of the way, here are my casting ideas for a live-action adaptation of She-Ra and the Princesses of Power. So Adora, aka She-Ra, is our main character of the show. And in the show, she's quite headstrong, brave, and competitive. But what really makes her a lovable heroine is her compassion, her kindness, and unwavering dedication to protecting her friends. So the actress playing Adora really needs to be able to capture both of these sides. She needs to be goofy, funny, but also believable in any high action sequences or fighting scenes. And so my first choice for who should play Adora is Kiernan Shipka. Now, you may already be familiar with her as she plays Sabrina on Netflix's The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina. And while I can't really comment on her acting as I haven't seen the show myself, I can say that from watching a few of her interviews, she appears to be quite charismatic, bubbly, and funny. And when compared to the other actresses on the list, she probably looks the closest to Adora and would look best in the role. Now, if we wanted to go with a slightly older version of the character, I think another actress that could play Adora is Haley Lou Richardson. Haley's probably most known for starring in coming-of-age indie films such as The Edge of 17 and 5 Feet Apart. So while she may not have a lot of mainstream appeal, she's probably the strongest actress on this list. And so because of that, I think she'd be able to give a really strong performance, especially in the more emotional and dramatic elements of the character. And unlike a lot of her contemporaries, she doesn't seem to be an actress that is overly image conscious. And by that I mean she isn't afraid of looking rough or unattractive for a role if need be. So I think she'd actually work really well with this particular version of She-Ra, which isn't overly glamorous or sexualized as she is in the original cartoon. And for my last choice, I'm actually going to throw Chloe Grace Moretz in there. Now, I know she's kind of oversaturated at this point, but the reason I put her on this list is because she looks quite similar to Adora in the same way that Kiernan Shipka does. And because she's worked on films such as Kick-Ass, she has experience working on fight scenes, which means she'll be believable and convincing in the role. I also think it would be interesting to see her play a character that's not as hard-edged, because even in her more comedic roles, she often seems to play characters that are quite snarky or crass. Chloe also manages to pull off soft butch, and if you've seen The Miseducation of Cameron Post, then you know what I'm talking about. And while this isn't an essential part to playing Adora, I definitely think it's an added bonus. So moving on, we've got Glimmer, who is the Princess of Bright Moon, as well as one of Adora's best friends. In the show, Glimmer is shown to be quite short-tempered and stubborn, which means she can often act impulsively before thinking of the consequences. But like Adora, she's driven by her loyalty to her friends and would do anything to protect them. In the show, Glimmer is voiced by Karen Fukuhara, whose voice just perfectly captures Glimmer's brash and frantic personality. Now, a character like this could easily be perceived as annoying if it's played up to be shrill or just too neggy. So it's important that the actress playing Glimmer gives a nuanced performance rather than playing her as this one-note annoying character. Another important thing to consider when casting a live-action version of Glimmer is her body type. In the show, Glimmer has what I like to call thick thighs, so it's important that the actress playing her has a similar build. With all of this in mind, my first choice for who should play Glimmer is Ariella Barrere. Ariella is probably most well known for playing Gert Yorks in Marvel's Runaways. As a character, Gert actually shares a lot of similarities to Glimmer, especially with her stubbornness and hot-headedness. But at the same time, Ariella manages to bring a certain vulnerability to this character, which makes her quite empathetic and relatable. And so I think Ariella would be able to play Glimmer quite well, especially given that she's played a similar character before, and her body type is quite close to Glimmer's, which, as I said before, is really important. But while I think Ariella is probably the best fit for the character, I have seen a lot of online discussion as to whether Glimmer's ethnic coding is supposed to be Eastern Asian. And given that Glimmer's voice actor in the show is East Asian, I thought it was an important thing to consider when casting the live-action version of Glimmer, which is why my other choice for who could play the role of Glimmer is Lana Condor. And while Lana might now be well known for playing Lara Jean in To All the Boys I've Loved Before, she's actually been in some big budget blockbusters such as X-Men and Alita Battle Angel. Lana has also shown that she has range in the types of characters that she can play, such as playing the cute and awkward Lara Jean, to then playing the hard-edged assassin Saya Kuroki in sci-fi's The Deadly Class. And while Lana may not have the exact same body type as Glimmer, I do think that she'd actually look quite good in the role and would be able to act well as the character. And now we've come to the final member of the Best Friend Squad, Bo. Bo is literally the sunshine of the group. He's caring, he's optimistic, and he just generally brings so much positive energy, which is why he's so lovable. There's also a running joke on the show that he's the only non-magical member of the group, but that doesn't mean he's any less useful because, as you probably guessed from his name, he's highly skilled in archery. Bo could also be considered the voice of reason of the group, especially with Adora and Glimmer often being reckless and running into danger, and he's typically the one that has to talk them out of it. Now, when we're thinking of the live-action version of Bo, there's only really one actor that comes to mind, and that's Kenan Lonsdale. So, Kenan found mainstream success after playing Wally West on CW's The Flash. But it wasn't until he appeared in the 2018 film Love, Simon as the main love interest Bram Greenfield that he was able to grow a strong following. And while he's since been focused on his music career, he is still acting as far as I'm aware, and is even expected to appear in Hulu's spin-off of Love, Simon, Love, Victor. And besides him basically looking like a live-action version of Bo already, if you've seen him in Love, Simon, you'd be able to tell that he can play a character like Bo who is affectionate and sweet. Now, while Kenan is near perfect for the role of Bo, he might be slightly too old for the role as he is 28 years old. So if you wanted to find someone that was a bit younger, then my second choice for who should play Bo is Jordan Fisher. Jordan's experience lies more in musical theatre and film, but he was able to gain more recognition after appearing alongside Lana Condor and Noah Centineo in the sequel for To All the Boys I've Loved Before. As John Ambrose, Jordan is really charming, which makes you fall in love with him almost instantly, and he does look like Bo, so I think he'd be a good alternative choice. Now that we've covered our heroic trio, it's time to move on to our residents of the Horde, starting with Catra. Catra's first introduced to us as one of Adora's best friends from when she was at the Horde. But throughout the show, we see her make a series of bad decisions, which leads her down a rather dark path. But without getting into any spoilers, we do see that there are some redemptive qualities to Catra and that she does show some regret and guilt for a lot of the decisions she makes. And it's because of these complexities that Catra is actually one of my favourite characters from the show. So in terms of casting Catra, there's only really one actress that I would want to see play her, and that's China Anne McClain. Now, the fact that she's a Disney child shouldn't put you off her, as it doesn't make her any less of a capable actress, as you can see from CW's Black Lightning. And it was actually her performance as Uma in Disney's Descendants franchise that convinced me she would be able to pull off a character like Catra. Like Catra, Uma's descent into villainy is driven by her feelings of abandonment and fear of being left behind. She feels betrayed by the other main characters of the film, which causes her to act the way she does. Now, because it is a Disney film, there isn't much room for emotional growth for the character, but I think China does a really good job with what she's given and manages to make us sympathize with the character and even root for her at times. This is especially important for a character like Catra, as we don't want to lose the ability to empathize with her so that we're able to invest in her journey as a character. And so I think China will be able to portray that more vulnerable side to the character without losing that devilish charm we all love about Catra. And now we move on to a character that truly is the heart of the show, and that's Scorpia. Like Catra, she is also a Force captain at the Horde, but unlike her other companions, she's loving, kind, and at times slightly naive. Now, Scorpia is probably the hardest character to cast a live-action version of, and that's mainly because she has a very specific build that is often not really represented in mainstream media. So trying to find an actress that fits that body type proved to be slightly more difficult than I would have liked. Now, one way to go about this is casting an athlete turned actress in the role, as they're more likely to have a similar build to Scorpia's. But while people like Gina Carano or even Ronda Rousey have that build, I'm not entirely sure they would be able to capture Scorpia's lightheartedness and funny character. So with all things considered, my suggestion for who should play Scorpia is Mackenzie Davis. Now, at first glance, you might be wondering why I thought Mackenzie would be a good choice for Scorpia, especially considering she doesn't really have the right build, but she's definitely proven that she can bulk up for a role if need be, which she showed when she played Grace in The Terminator Dark Fate. Mackenzie's also quite tall, coming in at 5'11", and that is something that's quite important to Scorpia because when we're first introduced to her, you see her physique and assume she's going to be this huge threatening character. And then she speaks and you realize she's actually just a bubbly sweetheart. And this is a quality I think Mackenzie would be able to play up quite well, because if you've seen her in the Black Mirror episode San Junipero, she can really play characters that are sweet and gentle-hearted. Now, without going into any huge spoilers for Season 2 and Season 3, I have included Entrapta alongside the other main characters at the Horde, as it's a main part of her story arc. We're first introduced to Entrapta when Glimmer approaches her to join the Princess Alliance. But later in the show, for reasons I won't go into, she ends up joining the Horde. Entrapta is driven by her pursuit for knowledge and her love for science. But because she's so one-track minded, it does mean that she can have a conflicting moral compass. As a character, Entrapta is cheerful and hyperactive. But at the same time, she's also lonely and quite oblivious, which makes her easily susceptible to manipulation and deception. Now, trying to choose my favorite vocal performance from the show is near impossible, only because they're all so strong and well suited to their characters. But if I had to choose, it would definitely be Christine Woods as Entrapta. Entrapta has such a unique voice that it's almost impossible to separate her from it. So when casting a live-action version of Entrapta, I tried to find actresses who had a similar tone or who would bring something new and original like Christine did. And so my first choice for who should play Entrapta is Billie Lourd. Billie's probably most known for appearing in a few seasons of Ryan Murphy's anthology series, American Horror Story. And while she is playing different characters each time, Billie definitely likes to bring this certain deadpan quality to her characters, which I think would work really well for someone like Entrapta, especially as she's quite blunt and direct. But it was actually Billie's performance as Gigi in the 2019 comedy film Booksmart that convinced me she would be a great fit for a character like Entrapta. Now, if you have seen the film, you're probably wondering where I'm going with this, especially because Gigi is such a different character from Entrapta. But the reason I thought Billie would be perfect for Entrapta is her complete commitment to the role. And I mean, she cranks it up to an 11 in this film, which is why I think if she was playing Entrapta, she would really go for it. And she wouldn't be afraid of being over the top or too eccentric, because that's who Entrapta is. Now, a slightly less known actress that I also think could play the role of Entrapta is Tanya Reynolds. While Tanya is relatively an unknown at this point and is only just beginning to carve out her career, she really impressed me in her performance as Lily in Netflix's Sex Education. Now, if you've seen Sex Education, then you're completely aware of how weird and bizarre Lily is as a character. But she has some great one-liners, and Tanya's delivery of them is perfect. Tanya has great comedic timing, which I think is super important for a character like Entrapta, because she often does say quite whimsical and random stuff. So if your delivery isn't right, it could fall flat. I've also seen that there's some discussion around whether or not Lily is supposed to be on the spectrum. And I think that's quite important because I recently saw a Twitter thread between Noelle Stevenson and a fan of the show where she confirmed that Entrapta was purposefully written to be interpreted as someone on the spectrum. So given that Tanya might have played a character very similar to this, I think she'd do a great job as Entrapta. And now we've come to the show's two biggest villains, Shadow Weaver and Hordak. Now, I do realise that later in the show, they aren't really the main villains anymore, but to avoid going into any spoilers, I'm only going to focus on these two, especially since they play such a pivotal role throughout the show. So starting off with Shadow Weaver, she's initially introduced as this twisted mother figure for both Adora and Catra, but it's soon very clear that she has her own ambitions and is willing to manipulate and hurt anyone in order to achieve them. In the show, Shadow Weaver is voiced by actress Lorraine Toussaint, and if I'm being honest, I can't imagine anyone else playing this character. Lorraine's voice just has such a chilling tone to it and really manages to balance that fine line between motherly but also manipulative. She's also played a similar character to this when she played the main antagonist in season 2 of Orange is the New Black, V. Parker. Like Shadow Weaver, V has a very toxic mother-daughter relationship with another inmate, Tasty, and is seen manipulating her throughout the season in order to rise up the prison food chain. And unlike the rest of the She-Ra cast, she has a long-standing career outside of voice acting, so I think she'd also work as the live-action version of the character and could also do something interesting in this version. Now, casting a live-action version of Hordak is slightly trickier, mainly because the actors I've considered for the role are a lot older than the rest of the cast. And I only mention this because there is a hinted romance between Hordak and another one of the characters, so I want to stress that I was mindful of the potential age gaps between the actors. That being said, I do think that the actor that would be perfect for this role is Ben Mendelsohn. I do think that Hollywood has typecast Ben Mendelsohn as the go-to villain of every franchise, but it's because he always nails the role. And this isn't necessarily a bad thing when you consider the other actors who've been typecast as the villain, such as Alan Rickman, Ralph Fiennes, Mads Mikkelsen, and even Christoph Waltz. What's also great about Ben Mendelsohn is he's still able to give great performances even when wearing heavy prosthetics. And you may be wondering why that's important, but it's actually quite difficult for some actors to do this, as they can often lose the ability to express particular emotions. And there's also a tendency to hide behind the prosthetics. But if you've seen him in Captain Marvel, then you know that Ben Mendelsohn doesn't do this. And I do think for a live-action version of She-Ra, the role of Hordak will be done either through prosthetics, as I said, or motion capture. So it helps if the actor playing him has experience working with those sorts of things. So those are my casting ideas for a live-action version of She-Ra and the Princesses of Power. I hope you liked my suggestions and enjoyed this video. And I just want to end this video by giving a huge thank you to the entire cast and crew of She-Ra and the Princesses of Power. I particularly want to thank Noelle Stevenson for creating a show that's truly representative and giving us characters that we can all resonate with and relate to. It's really hard to make sure that your show sticks the landing, but She-Ra and the Princesses of Power does just that. And while I'm sad to say goodbye to these characters, I couldn't have imagined a better way to end the show.